Hello, everyone. Thanks so much for joining me. I am Andy, your host, and I'm with Integrity Data Insights. And I help companies grow by helping improve their reporting and analytics. And I'm thrilled to have my guest on the show today, Paul Spencer. He is with Second Nature Solutions. And welcome, Paul. Thanks for joining me.
Yeah, thank you. This is gonna be fun.
So your company, I just want to start right in. Your company, I like the name of it. It's Second Nature Solutions,
hmm
and you're known as a family business advisor. So maybe tell me a little bit about, what Second Nature means and how you came up with that name and kind of what you do.
Yeah, sure. So second nature is rooted in making something that's ingrained in us, right? It's a habit. That's the definition of second nature, and it's something that's inside our subconscious, right? We do something as part of second nature,
Yeah.
um, and it's really who we are. That's also part of our second nature. We just kind of do things by default. So that's the idea of it. The tagline originally was around now leading your business is a deeply ingrained habit, right?
Yeah.
And really, what it's rooted on is relationship, forming a partnership with owners, with the customers that I have, and a partnership not in a legal sense or a equity sense, but more of let's work on things together and have somebody that you have a confidant, basically, on either personal things or business things that we can be working on. But over time, you start to change, right?
Yeah.
And maybe your behaviors are different with your executive teams or even with your family. Maybe the values that you have around and the beliefs you have around how your business operates and how it works starts to shift a little bit. And then when you have that shift and you have that change, then the goal is to become second nature, right? We just do these things because it's second nature. And one of the things I always say is that if at any point in time we don't work together anymore, right? And you've
Yeah.
reached a definition of done, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
and somebody comes to you and says, "Yeah, this is good. Why do you do these things?" You should have an answer, right? You should have a clear understanding about why you do things because it's part of your, it's part of you, right? It's second nature. It's been designed around who you are, how you think, what your business is like, what your family instills, as opposed to, oh, I had a consultant come in. His name is Paul. He told me to do it that way, right? I don't know exactly why we're doing it, but that's what we
Right.
set it up. That would be a failure on for me, from my perspective. I want you to understand what you're doing. We design it for you. It comes from you, and then I just help, basically as a guide, as an advisor.
Oh, that's amazing. Yeah, that thanks for that. That's really good. And you work mostly with family owned businesses, is that correct?
Yeah. Started doing that. It's probably about 6 years now, doing privately held family businesses. Um, and that came out of, so I used to own a technology company called Pomyet. So peace of mind and everyday technology with Rob Kiefer and Stacy Sheldon. Those were three of us were business partners, and we
Yeah.
built healthcare systems. So for hospitals and insurance providers. So I learned a lot through that, owning a business, working with customers, right? We did sales, we did all kinds of things. And then what came out of that was opportunity to work more with small companies. Cause even then we were working with big enterprise hospital systems,
Right.
Fortune 100 companies. Um, and that's kind of my background anyways, working as a consultant in those big enterprise corporations. And then so then that led to opportunity to work with a small business, 20 employees, probably around 12 million, right, in business for 20
Mhm.
years, um,
Yeah.
and help them with some technology things that they had going on. And then that led to some operations, if you wanted to call it that. That's what the owner called it, was operations.
Right.
And then that led to being an advisor for the owner. And then did that for about 4 months. And then that turned into second nature.
Oh, that's great. What a great story. Yeah, it's and I'm guessing like, these small businesses, I mean, you must add it's got to be great to have someone to turn to. The person that was on my show earlier this week talked about, he called it business owner insomnia or loneliness that a lot of
Hmm.
business owners face. So I'm guessing that kind of ties in a little bit what you do too, is you kind of give them a sounding board and kind of a way to work out their problems. And like you said, I love that word, a guide. I mean, that seems like that's the perfect word of kind of
Yeah.
describing.
Yeah, that's right. It's a guide. So most of the time, um, they're struggling with something to do with technology. So the term they use is IT. So my IT's not working. So what does that mean, right? And that can mean a whole bunch of things. So sometimes it's because they have product, a software product that's customer facing that they built over time over a series of, most of these companies are at least 20 years old.
Yeah.
So over decades, and they built this customer product, but for whatever reason, it's kind of falling in on itself. But the owner doesn't understand why, and they're starting to lose
Yeah.
confidence in their IT team, and then so I become that bridge, right? That the kind of orchestrator between, translator, you can call it that as well, between the owner and then the IT side, or the software development side,
Okay.
because they're both struggling. One is saying, I can't do everything you're asking, and the other one's saying, why are you doing it so slow, and why is it taking so long, and why is it always broken? And
Right.
that seems to be the general theme, especially for small businesses, because the owners are entrepreneurs for the most part,
Hmm.
um, at least for the first generation, and they are innovators. They're always thinking about the market and where they're going to
Right.
go, and they move fast and they don't like to
Right.
slow down. And they're generally pretty good at sales. They're really good at sales, because that's what drives the business. So they don't have a high tolerance for software development being slow and expensive, right?
Right. I can
Uh,
imagine.
but they don't even know what it is, right? They really don't understand it very well, and they don't understand
Right.
why it can be slow and expensive. So
Okay.
it's just giving them some confidence and some reassurance and building some trust between the two, right? The
Yeah.
ownership and IT, and then we go from there. So
And is a lot of the products, like the software that you're talking about, is a lot of it kind of homegrown systems or
yeah,
custom
mostly,
built?
yeah, it's mostly homegrown systems that they've built, um, and that team would be, I don't know, it spans anywhere between just two people who've
Yeah.
been there, maybe three people who've been there for a really long time and building something just incrementally. Um, and some of them who are more mature and say they understand that they have a product, a customer
Yeah.
facing product. They may have a dozen or so um, developers, or QA, project manager, if you want to, all of those kind of lumped into one. But
Right.
from a corporate perspective, it's still very small. Um, and so then they try to do a lot with a small team. And generally, those teams don't have a lot of breadth of experience, because they've been in that small business right out of college, or it was their
Right.
first thing that they started doing. And so they don't have a good breadth of how to do deployments, or how to think about things in a different way. Some do, some don't. It just kind of spans.
Yeah, interesting. And then, so yeah, I've been kind of on both sides of it, I guess. So I can definitely, the questions I got in my head are swirling around. I got plenty of them. Do you ever, I guess, as person, because part of what I do is custom software as well.
Hmm.
I
Yep.
haven't kind of focused on it as much, but there's a lot of questions that come up, and I don't always have the best answer for, like, should we build it or buy it? Those kind of
Hmm.
things. Do you help
Yeah.
navigate that as well? And is there any
Yeah.
kind of way that you kind of steer them, like totally, against building it yourself or against, or you?
Oh, yeah, I guess it would depend on their current situation, on
Uh,
whether I would lean one way or the other. So if they've invested a lot, say in a custom software, and it's fairly good, and it has traction from a user perspective and from a
yeah,
business perspective, then you might still just continue to build it. Um, but really, it's different for everybody. So I wouldn't say one is better than the other. But what we know is if you were to start from scratch and kind of doing that analysis, it's always seemingly easier and less expensive to go with the vendor, right? The
Uh-huh.
the buy it. But we know that even if you buy it, you're still going to customize it. It's very rare that you're just going to buy it and use it.
Right.
Especially if you're doing a front facing, customer facing product. If it's back office, you can kind of get away with just using what they give you. But even then, you're likely going to say that doesn't work for me. How can I adjust that?
Yeah.
Um, so it's always just giving them some insight into just because it costs $100,000 or $200,000 to buy it off the shelf, you're not done, right?
Right.
There's still going to be probably 50, 60K of maintenance on development on your side, not including the continued licensing that you're going to pay. So,
Right.
and that I think that's important, Andy, like, because you and I know all of this, but when the owner is a sales marketing genius in
Mm,
manufacturing or
yeah.
right is really good over here in their space, that whole thing that we just talked about is not a paradigm they're used to, right? They're used to buying a machine that goes on the floor in the factory, right? They know they have maintenance, but it's something they're buying that it'll depreciate over time, right? As part of an
Yeah.
expense. And that's it. I'm done with it, right? Well, of
Yeah.
course, we'll maintain it as we go, but software doesn't work that way. And it's always going to have an expense, regardless of how much you pay up front or not.
Yeah, interesting. Wow, that's great. I would say too, in my experience, in helping a lot of small businesses out, the balance or the trade-off seems to be like, you build it and then kind of sometimes I think the tendency is like you said, we're done, we're not going to mess with this. And then I think what happens, I like to paint the visual of, we've all been past those factories with the empty parking lots and the weeds going through
Yeah.
cracks. That visual always comes to mind because,
Yeah.
really it's so true that it's amazing if you don't keep
Yeah.
up with it, if you don't, whether you're buying it or building it, either way, but if you don't invest something into it, it doesn't have to be, nearly as significant as when you first
Yeah,
launched
it could
it.
be. It could be just as much. So software is never done. That's the kind of the phrase I always use. And uh, that's an important. That's on purpose phrase
Yeah,
because somebody who doesn't know what you're talking about will say, "What does that mean?" And then that comes into the thing that we're talking about. So a lot,
yeah,
just like what we just said, a lot of times it's thought as an expense. Once I'm done in 10 months or whatever it takes for you to set it up, then I'm done with it, but software is never done because that's just the nature of software.
right. Yeah, interesting. And there are times when I'm guessing, with your background, both of us work kind of for bigger companies and now smaller ones. Is there times when you're kind of it's got to be tough because you probably can see both sides, but that's
Yeah,
part of the value that you bring is, being able to translate between the two. But I'm guessing, a lot of times, the engineers might overcomplicate it or make it, that
oh,
was, but the
yeah.
the the owners are kind of like, how can this be that hard?
Yes, that's
So,
right.
so
Yeah, yeah, so that's, so for me, my role, how I see my role is to guide you. So, and to level you up, right? And then to also tamp down the disputes that are going on.
yeah,
And that's that, like what we talked about, there's a bridge between IT and ownership that needs to be created. Um, but that also lives when you're dealing with an owner that lives with sales, right? It lives with marketing, lives with everybody.
uh-huh,
So for me, my aim is to give that person, the owner, a confidant to be able to have conversations because, as you said, it's lonely at the top. It can be lonely at the top, and you don't have anybody to really talk with. And so um, we can work through those things, and it's your decision. It's ultimately your decision. I help
right.
inform you, I help advise you. I'll give you the pros and cons here and the pros and cons here.
Hmm.
I will have conversations with the IT team or the sales team, help you inform a decision. But in the end, you decide Because if I decide, then that breaks the whole paradigm we talked about at the very beginning. All of a sudden now it's Paul's decision. And now why are we doing this? Well, because Paul said so. And that's not the purpose, right? The purpose is for you as the owner and as an
Yeah.
organization, family business, to learn how to make the decision, to learn how to work together, to learn on what these external factors might be. And you may always need a third party advisor to help you do that. But over time, you make the decision and you know why you chose to build it or to buy it, right?
Yeah. It's almost
And
like,
that makes a huge difference.
like I
Yeah.
used to follow, I still follow him on and off, but Dave Ramsey with his financial stuff,
Hmm.
and he always tells people, "Don't invest in something you don't understand." Like,
Yeah.
don't,
Yeah.
even if you can't explain it, don't invest in it. So I think that's kind of what you're saying a little bit with the IT is like, the owner's not going to obviously understand all the SQL and
Mm-mm.
all the lines of code or whatever's going
No.
on. But they at least understand, like, kind of why you structure it this way or why it's important to have it that way. And it seems like you'd add a ton of value doing that.
Yeah. The main thing that they see there that they are investing in is their business to be able to acquire and retain customers, right? So that's their investment. All the nitty gritty about SQL and everything else, that's beyond them, and they don't want to know any of that.
Right.
So then when you're creating that bridge, it's about how do I communicate from the product development side over to the ownership so that they can have confidence that their investment is going well, right? So
Right.
there's a lot of those things that we talk about.
Yeah. So maybe, I mean, we've kind of covered this a lot, but anything, just in general to talk about with family run businesses and the dynamics of that, then,
Hmm.
what kind of patterns do you see, good or bad, or the ugly, or
Yeah.
what are those businesses are like for some of us that don't experience it to the level that you do?
Yeah, I think for me, one thing that I think was uh, eye opening was coming out of the corporate world was that there are a lot of family owned businesses. And
Yeah.
I never would have, I guess I just didn't understand that or know that. In my world, it was big corporations downtown in Cincinnati and Dayton and within the region, right? And
Right.
they kind of ran the show. They had all the employees, right? And that's kind of how I viewed the world. But when you kind of come under the fold a little bit and you work with one family owner, and then they introduce you to another family owner, and then all of a sudden you see, whoa, there's actually more family owned businesses and they employ more of Americans than the corporate side does.
Yeah.
So I've actually got a cool little, so got a podcast and some videos on that at the Second Nature website, which I think
Yeah.
is just very interesting and something that I learned by doing that. And so you asked about the patterns. The patterns are um, that the business itself is pretty sacred from the owner's perspective.
Yeah.
And so they can kind of get this tunnel vision on we got to make this work. And the business takes a lot of their time and a lot of their effort and a lot of their attention. Um, and it's this entity that they're trying to keep alive, kind of like how you said with the parking lot, right? With the weeds, it's a
Mhm.
living, breathing thing, and they enjoy it and they've built it, and it takes up a lot of their effort.
Yeah.
But on the other side, the family side, and not all of them are this way, but I'd say a majority of them, um, if it comes down to difficult and tough times and decision making, they're very adapted at doing that in the
Yeah.
business. But on the family side, they kind of hesitate with it and they kind of back away with it. And if it really was up to them, um, fine. Andy, I know you and I are good brothers and we've have our disagreements, but if you don't want to be in the business and you don't want to do what I'm doing in the business, fine. And if that affects our relationship, then that's okay with me, right? I'll move over to the business and you and I will kind of drift apart family wise. And I've seen that happen
Yeah.
multiple times, enough for it to be a pattern, I would say. Um, And so
Like, so the
that's
kind of the two, the personal and the business, kind of how they come together, and sometimes maybe in a negative way.
yeah. So a lot of times, uh, and these are some of the things. So using my hands here
Yeah,
is uh, the family is um, forever, right? The family is infinite, right? We meaning we have children, we have nieces and nephews, and they'll have families, and they'll have families, and they'll go on for generations, right? This
right.
business over here is a finite asset.
Hmm.
But sometimes that gets complicated, and we say, well, it's okay if the brothers don't really get along anymore, as long as this thing
Yeah,
doesn't die, right? So
I
so it's
see.
been more about, all right, let's turn that around a little bit, and let's say that the business is finite and it's just an asset, right? And if we focus more on creating an infinite family, and then maybe Andy, you and I disagree, but maybe you've got some great ideas, and we have a lot of family wisdom about how to own a business, and we know lots of people in town, and right, all kinds of networking things that we have. And what if we help you form another business,
Oh, yeah.
right? And
Yeah,
so, or what if we sell this and we create another business, or right, businesses can be spun up and spun down as many times as we want. But the
right.
only thing that keeps them going is the knowledge and the wisdom that we have within our family. Um, so anyway, that's a pattern. And so
Wow.
for me, I focus on, these are through all my learnings of working with different families. So it's family coaching. There's three pillars: family coaching, the family side, the
Yeah,
business, which is what we were talking about, and then the technology is also what we were talking about. So those three things, those are the three legs of the stool. If you don't have those three things and you're working on each one of them intentionally, then you get wobbly. And some may say, I'm a manufacturing business. I'm good with my family. I don't need technology. And I would say that, hey, we're 20, what year is it? 2024,
yeah,
right?
that's
You
right.
have
Yeah,
you have technology, and you have technology needs. And that may be just around maybe your payroll systems or your CRM systems, your Salesforce type systems, right? You're still using technology, and those things are important to be able to understand what you're doing with them, right?
right.
Yeah.
One thing I thought of too while you were talking is, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Just some people will say, there's no unique business problem that, if I'm just making general statements, but people will say, if everybody has these kind of, accounting or CRM or these different systems,
Mhm.
um, and then so some people think, I guess my question to you is, like, when you work with these different businesses, is it kind of like true that, like, what works for one won't work for another, or is it kind of the opposite, or
For like say like Salesforce, is that what you mean?
just in general, I guess, just technology challenges. I don't know, maybe, because all of them, there's a lot of people at school of thought that kind of say, a lot of businesses, there shouldn't be a lot of custom stuff because it's,
Oh, I
common,
see.
every business challenge is common.
Yeah.
I don't know if I agree with that. I just wanted your thoughts on, because you,
Yeah, I
you
don't
tend to
think I
hear
would
it a
agree
lot.
with that either. I would say that it spans, I mean, there's a wide variation of uh, technology within each business, especially family owned businesses, because we're not talking about um, just sucking up a bunch of Microsoft licenses, right? And
Right.
building everything on Microsoft, and then going and buying Salesforce licenses for everybody, right? All those enterprise type systems are easy to buy in a corporate world.
Hmm.
Um, but family businesses don't operate that way. They don't tend to think that way. So they might have kind of a mishmash of things that they've bought or built,
Yep.
um, and uh, and that's serving them, right? And so then when you get to your question of, well, should I use uh, a payroll system for every company? Well, not every company is the same, and
Right.
so the payroll system, yes, are standard, and you can use them in different ways, and that's a vendor model that you can use. But there might be reasons why you do things differently. right?
Right.
I think as a business owner, though, you're looking to create consistency and predictability in the processes and systems that you have throughout your entire organization. So if your payroll has a lot of exceptions to it, then it's naturally going to take more time, take more expenses, right, to be able to manage it. And there's likely going to be a lot of what we call special cause symptoms, which is you get these outliers of something breaking because it's not consistent, right? There's not a standard way of doing it. So you're trying to get them to come into some more standard way of doing it. Um, but does that mean that you could buy NetSuites off the shelf and just go ahead and you'll be good? Likely not, because the
Right.
family business runs in a different way. It's not going to be the standard, right? From a cost perspective, it probably doesn't make sense. And then two, they tend to do things differently, which is part of their success.
Right. And I think you and I have talked about this before. I think when I was getting your advice on something I was working on, and I forgot how you worded it, but you basically said, if you put something off the shelf, like, you're either going to have to change your process
Hmm.
to adapt to
Yes.
this, or you're going to have to change the software to adapt to one of
Yes.
the two things has to give.
Yeah, that's right. So, yeah, that's really important, is that software is a tool. So don't let the tool be a barrier or a roadblock to your process, right? So a lot of times you'll go in, and this lives in the corporate world too, is you go in and you say, um, well, if there's a opportunity for improvement on how to do some kind of business function, let's say accounting, right? We
Right.
could accounts payable. Actually, let's do accounts receivable.
Hmm.
We're having a hard time collecting our payments. And then we go in and we look at the process for collecting payments, and we say, oh, here's a good opportunity to adjust how we ask for payments or how we send payments or whatever that is.
Right.
um, and let's make some adjustments there. But the internal team says, well, we can't do that. And you say, why? Well, because our software doesn't do that, or our software says we have to do that, right? And so then you say, well, what are the alternatives, right? That's just a tool. It's not dictating how we run our business, because there's opportunity. Excuse me.
Yeah.
There's opportunity to bring in 200,000, $500,000 more in cash flow, right? If
Right.
you adjust your process. So
Yeah.
we get stuck a lot of times in our tools. It happens in email. This is the way the email works, email
Yeah.
tool, right? This is the way Salesforce works. This is the way Tableau works, right?
Right.
All of these things. And then, so we just assume that that's the way we have to do it. But you have to separate software, which is a tool, from the process, which is the business function that we want to achieve. And we improve the business function. And then we say, what can we do differently with the software?
Great. I love that thoughts. Love those thoughts. We've talked on it quite a bit, but maybe do you have any kind of examples or something you want to share of, like, a problem that I feel like this is an interview. That's not my intention, but I just want to highlight the great work that you do.
Yeah.
But just if you have any kind of, examples you'd love to share, or any, thing of, hey, this is, I had this problem and I work with them, and
Yeah.
um, I promise this isn't isn't an interview. I can't speak.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Yeah. So we've been talking a lot technology in the business. I think on the family side, um, there's been some beautiful things. And for me, I like bringing my faith into what I do and why I do it. And
yeah.
I do believe that God has given me the opportunity to be there for people, for the owners and for the families. And so there's lots of beautiful things that happen on the family
uh,
side, which is they really, what they're after, the owner, is they want operational integrity, right? They need some IT integrity, or
right.
process integrity.
Right.
But in the end, when you're looking at and you're seeing how things are going, you can tell that relationships aren't really working. And I have an
Right.
example of that where we were working, and I kind of put it as kind of the fishbowl, right? You got the fish tank, and
Uh-huh.
almost to your parking lot analogy. So you have the fish tank, and we don't clean the fish tank. Right. That was
Yeah.
on actually Finding Nemo, right? It was part of the
Oh, yeah,
strategy
yeah.
to get out of the
Yeah, they purposely did that. That's right.
yeah.
They
And so it
they
gets all
popped it.
gummed up and right, and it's all
That's
clear,
right.
not
Yeah,
very clear. And so what you do when you work on the business, you start putting processes in place, and processes aren't meant to be stuffy and turn people into robots. It's just to create some clarity and some visibility into what we do so that we can
yeah,
get some consistency and we get more predictable outcomes. That's the whole purpose of that's the aim of creating systems and processes.
yeah,
So you work on that and you do that in different places and you find different areas that have more value than this, and you kind of jump around the business and you're doing that. And let's say you do that for 18 months. And it starts the fish tank starts to get a little clearer, right?
yeah.
And and we have a little more clarity on the outcomes that we're getting, rather than my from the owner's perspective, there's so much customer calls that are coming in and customers are going crazy and I don't know why, right? That tends to fade away when you get consistency, right?
Yeah,
So you start to do that and things start to clear up, and people are working together, just because they have understanding about how to work together because you put processes in place, right? And things, you have this more harmony of what's going on.
yeah.
And this has happened more than once in my experience, at again being an outside advisor, with families, is because they have family members, multiple family members in the business, and so you start to get some clarity, and then I start getting calls either from other family members or just internal staff that are saying, "Hey, we set up these processes and we're doing this." And I'm like, yeah, yeah. Well,
Uh-huh.
so and so just came into my office and they're saying, uh, to just skip that for now and let's do this. Don't worry about the process. I need you to do these things. And I
Right.
say, okay, then what do you think about that? Well, that doesn't create our consistency, right? That's not what we agreed to do. That started happening often, right? And then you go back to the family and you realize that the family has different ideas of what the business should do, and they have different
Uh,
relationships. And the words that I use, they're tampering. So you may have 3 or 4 family members, and this family member kind of circles back around and is talking to the sales team saying, go do
oh,
this, right?
yeah.
And then this other family member's over here talking to the development team saying, hey,
I
just
see.
go
Kinda
ahead and do
undermine.
this. Yeah, it's called tampering. I would call it tampering. And
Yeah,
um, and
interesting.
it's because they don't have a way of working together on the family side, right? So they don't have strong working relationships. And then,
Right.
but they have definite opinions about how things should go. And so what happens, these are the beautiful things, right? That I started out with my long backdrop story.
Yeah,
So
that was
you
great.
end up getting them together and you say, hey, this is what I'm seeing. What is the family vision? Where are you guys going as a family? And
Right.
sometimes they can say that, sometimes they can tell you, sometimes they can't. And so that's led to a lot more family coaching, creating family charters and doing it. For me, it's not like this big exhaustive thing. There's big industries that do this. It's more to get them aligned, to foster better working relationships and then also personal relationships, and then getting them to have agreement on how that works within the business, right? And
Wow.
that has worked with families who are older, meaning they've got families of their own, right? They're in their 40s and 50s, and it's also worked with families who are younger, meaning the other generations, right?
Yeah.
They're in their 20s, early 30s, starting families, right? And so you have in my perspective, you have to be very intentional about the family side of things, just
Mhm.
as much as you are about what revenue looks like for next quarter for your family business.
So has it been kinda, if I'm hearing you right, I mean, sometimes people will be at each other's throats and not getting along, kinda undermining each other, and then kind of when you kinda meet with them, eventually over time, a lot of that dissipates and you get kinda
Yes.
more family unity kind of, I guess?
Yes, that's right. Yeah. It's very emotional actually,
Wow.
which was also very,
Yeah.
um, I don't know. I just didn't know. I I wouldn't have predicted it, but you get
Right,
the
you're like, I'm just here trying to help with some software, like, I'm not and you come out of here with it. That's beautiful. Wow.
Yeah, so I have a coaching background, and I went and did all of that, certified and everything. So I have experience in and understanding about how to get people together and mediate and do a lot of those
Yeah.
things. The thing couldn't ever predict was there's a lot of backstories within the families, right? Just like you have with your family, and I have with
Yeah.
my family,
Uh-huh.
we've known each other our entire lives. And so it's not just a working relationship where you and I have known each other for the past 8 years as work
Right.
colleagues, right?
Yeah.
We've known each other our entire lives.
Right.
So it's not, it's a whole like intertwining of the time you mistreated me when we were
Yeah.
in grade school, right? And you were mean to me, right? Not just what we're trying to decide what we're going to do on the
Right, and it could trigger something,
yeah,
and
for sure.
you're
Yeah.
right back there. Wow.
Yeah, so it's very emotional, but it's also very therapeutic. When you get them in a room and there's again, you probably wouldn't be surprised because we're talking about process, but I have a process that I follow and that I created to
That's
help
cool.
them start to understand the value and the purpose and the love of each other. So it's more
Wow.
about what do you see in Andy? What are the good things that Andy brings to the family and to you in your own life, and what are some of those funny and memorable moments you have with him? And we
Yeah.
have those kinds of conversations,
Wow.
and then we get to the messy part, which is where do you guys want to go together? And a lot of times they tend to say we want to be together, right? It's that unity piece. And
Right.
so what do you want to do about that? Well, I think I want to kind of get over myself and figure some things out, right? And that is hugely beneficial, not just for the business. It is very beneficial for the business because it runs differently, but also for their own family and their own personal lives, right? You want to have a business, you want to be successful, you want to build this asset, you want to help the community by employing people and giving money away, being philanthropic, and all of those things. But you also want to have a happy, healthy family as well, and good
Yeah.
relationships within there.
Wow. I almost think I think you need to change your LinkedIn tag to be like family business advisor slash therapist, because I
Yeah,
think you're
therapist.
you are.
Yeah.
That's fabulous though. I mean,
Well,
because you
one thing is, it's it that only comes over time of building trust, right? So
right.
um it's something that is just eased into, and it's a suggestion that I
Yeah.
might make at some point, and hey, this is what I'm seeing. The only reason that works is because it's something that's trusted and it's something that they see that they want to do, right?
Right.
um so anyway,
Right.
it's
Well,
yeah.
you come across as a very genuine, not that we've known. So I mean, I could understand you could add tremendous amount of value there. Want to switch gears a little bit with the remainder of our time left and talk a little
Mhm.
bit about your podcast, which I enjoy, called the Resilience Talk.
Yep.
And we can hit on a couple different topics. I know you've had some on wholeheartedness and on
Mhm.
mentorship and different things. One that kind of stuck out with me is there's one where you're talking about the perfectionist trap.
Yeah, the perfection
Um,
trap. Yeah.
Tell
Mhm.
people a little bit about that to give them a little taste of kind of what you're at with that, and kind of how
Yeah.
what your thoughts are.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. The perfection trap is a concept. Basically, you asked about patterns of family businesses. So this is a pattern, and it's a well-known pattern, probably more intrinsically in the IT industry, right, in the software development world. Um, but it's not always very well understood or intentionally worked on, right? So the perfection trap is the idea that you have a software product that you're building. It could even be the that you bought, right, and that you're just implementing. And
Right.
implementing means you might have customizations and things. Um, and so the perfection trap is the idea that you're not satisfied with what you've got so far, and so you're like, well, the customer probably would like to have this or like that, and I personally don't like this, so let's add these 12 different things in there. And in the end, you keep building and you keep building and you keep building, and you never get any feedback from your end users. who are
Yeah,
the ones who are ultimately going to use it and likely pay for it. If they're external facing, if they're in, I had this story. This was at a big big corporation here in
yeah,
Cincinnati, and I was leading one of the teams. We were building this global product, which was
yeah,
actually pretty cool. And so we were building it out, and I also have experience in usability and human factors engineering and all of that. But this was before that experience that I had, and so we were given a demo, and the director at the time, she's like, I was telling her, I'm like, when we're doing this, but this doesn't flow correctly. And I don't know exactly how it should flow. And I'm not exactly sure what to do about it, but it doesn't feel right.
it's
Right.
like you're pretty sure something's not right, but you don't know
Yeah.
exactly know what it
Yeah.
is.
So it was really, I didn't know the words at the time, but it was a usability issue. Um, and she looked at me at that time, and we were in this meeting. I don't know, there's a dozen people in there. And she's like, well, Paul, don't worry about that for right now, because this is an internal system, and
Uh,
they have to use it regardless. So you don't need to get too hung up on that.
right.
And I remember it's just kind of like it blew a fuse in my brain. Not that I got angry, right? It's
Yeah,
just
yeah.
like, well, that doesn't make sense. Not sure why it doesn't make sense, but and so in the end, you want. Now I lost my train of thought. What was I going with that?
Um, yeah. Shoot, we both
Yeah,
lost. Um, shoot. Yeah, I lost my train of thought
yeah,
too.
that's okay. So
Oh, the
what we're
perfectionist. You said it was going to be used by internal people.
Yeah,
Um,
so even when you get feedback, right? You still need feedback from your internal users
oh,
just as
right.
much as you need it from your external users. Because in my world today, I would say back that to that director is, okay, that makes sense. However, in order for them to be effective in their job and their work, and not to wear them out and give them extra steps or whatever that usability issue was, we would want to adjust this, right?
Right.
Um, and so you need feedback. And the only way you can get feedback is you have to show them and give them something to work on, to actually use.
Yeah,
The
right.
more you hold it, the more you add to it, the more you keep stacking a bunch of things on, the more you're wasting your time, and the more you're losing money, because it costs time and money to do that. And you'll
Yeah.
get to a point where you give it to them, and you spend a lot of time and money, and they say, it's good, but it doesn't actually solve my problem, and it doesn't, and right, and you lose value. And so they either choose not to buy it or they choose not to use it.
Right. Like, I'll use a real example. We'll do a little bit of back and forth here. That'll be fun. Is I've told you
Hmm.
about this before, where I've
Yeah.
developed several different things, and I kick myself because I was like, why haven't I put that thing out there? And I loved your feedback about, like, you got to shorten the cycle to get people's feedback,
Yep.
because I've done that where, I'm working right now on this. I call it the report planner, where
Hmm.
because I find that a lot of people don't put a lot of effort into the planning of their reports. It's kind of, their analysts over there has access to Power BI, Tableau, whatever. They drag a couple things, blah, blah, bam, and it's all of a sudden you have a dashboard, and it's like, wait a minute, well, does it answer this or does it answer that? So I've been playing around with that idea, but like, here I am, and I haven't released it. But so I kind of could learn from what you're
Yeah.
doing.
So right now you don't know if it's a good idea, a bad idea, or a mediocre idea,
Right. And I
right?
have gotten some feedback. I'm not saying I've gotten none, but I
Yep.
think part of it is, you get the feedback and then you don't always know what to do with it, right? Because the best I loved I think in your podcast, the one you talked about was, you said, like, wait a minute, that's not how I see it. Wait,
Yeah.
you're using it that way? That's not at all what I had in mind. And
Yeah. And
it's fascinating.
you need to know that as soon as possible, right? Otherwise, you spend a lot of time and money on your way of thinking of it, but in the
Yeah.
market, the market won't use it because it doesn't match, it doesn't line up with the market, right?
Well, yeah,
Um,
walk me through, like, what should I do then? So say, okay, I have this idea.
mhm.
It's tough because you have to get it to a certain point to get feedback, right? Because obviously I can.
Yeah, there's strategies around that. But you need to have a discipline to say that here's the value of whatever I'm building. And then you scope that down super, super, super small. And then
Okay.
you build that, and then you throw it out there, right? And then
Yeah.
so in that case, let's say you do that over a course of a week, right?
Right.
And you've got something that has some value. It doesn't have all the stuff, but now you give it to me, right? I'm your potential customer, and you say, "Hey, I'm building this for it solves this problem, and this is the scenario it solves. Here, go try it out." and
Right.
then and then I go and use it, and I say, well, this, and I give you some feedback, right? And then that comes back to your next week of work, and you say, well, what Paul's saying is true, but he's actually getting me to build Salesforce, and I don't want to build Salesforce, right? I
Right.
don't want to build Power BI or whatever
Right.
those things are, right? I have a new idea. So, but it's good. It's good feedback. So I'm going to
Right.
take some of what he's saying, and I'm going to push it in to this part. And then next Friday, I'm going to give it back to him and see what he says. And I'm going to give it to 10 people and see what they say, right? And
Yeah.
you're incrementally building it, and you're incrementally building value, and eventually you say, I'm going to charge $5 for this, right? And that's when you know if if it has market value, because somebody will pay for it,
Right.
right?
It's almost like if I'm probably oversimplifying it, but it's almost like what you're describing is the whole agile software development process in general, right? I mean,
No, that's right. Yes, it
you're
is. It
kind
is the
of
agile process. um so agile at this point, it's been 25 years, um has been so corporatized, and uh I don't even know what agile
yeah,
really is anymore, but yeah, it's iterative design, right? And it's an emergent architecture design, right? These are all terms. You can look them up on the internet.
yeah, yeah,
So emergent design, which means I don't um, design the entire database and the architecture right up front. I emerge it as I go, right? So the APIs and I don't know,
yeah,
whatever different models you're going to use. Um, and because that gives you value, because in the end, our short feedback loops are what we want. And this fits with anything. So if we're building a business process
yeah,
in sales, we have to build a feedback loop that's small and short, so that we can prove or disprove that whatever process we're making actually
yeah,
works, right? Doesn't do me any good to run it for 6 months or a year and then find out it doesn't work or it's not good, right?
right,
I can,
right.
if I do that every day, I get 365 iterations and I'll improve it, as opposed to one iteration would run this process for the whole year.
That's brilliant. I love that way of looking at it. Yeah, because like when people come to me and they come in with a problem, I don't always probably word it as elegantly as you're saying, but I love like the iterative process. Like, let's start small. Like, I don't like it if somebody comes in and they're like, hey, it's going to take 6 months and this much money and whatever. Like, I'd
Mhm.
love it if they just say, look, I don't know exactly, but we think, I can get it to this point in a month,
Yeah.
or, you
Yeah.
pick
So in
the
that,
small milestones.
yeah, it's perfect. So if somebody says, here's 6 months of budget, here's a budget, right? And you say, well, that'll get you 6 months. And then they say, I got to do all this whole thing, right? Then you could say, um, well, we'll start here, right? You get to pick where the value is by interviewing them and talking to them.
Yeah.
And then you say, we'll see where we get to, but if we follow my process, right, we may get to month 4 and we'll be done and we'll save you money, right?
Right. Yeah. That's smart. Yeah. And people, I think it's a great way of doing things. Let's talk a little bit else about what else do you want people to know about resilience talk? I guess how'd you come up with the name, and maybe just
Yep.
kind of give us a little bit of a flavor of some of the other parts of it.
Yep. So resilience talk, and there's a resilience newsletter that you can sign up on our website. Um, the idea about being resilient is we are in a strange time, right? Where maybe our businesses are predictable, but all what we would call the imposed inputs, all the things that are going on externally with the economy,
Yeah.
with our government, right? With
Hmm.
uh, interest rates, right? Inflation, all
Yeah.
labor force, like uh, has been difficult over the last several years.
Yeah.
So all of those things are coming at you. You don't have much control over that.
Yeah.
So resilience is saying, hey, if you have a business that's thriving, and has consistency and predictability, and you have a high performing team that knows how to adjust and flex with things that come at them, you have a resilient business. So regardless of interest rates, regardless of the labor force,
Yeah.
of inflation, or those things that are going to affect your business, uh, we don't want those things necessarily, but when they do happen, we have businesses, processes in place, and we have people who are used to operating with processes that they adjust, and they tweak the business and the processes to adjust to the imposed inputs, right? And that feels
Right.
good. And if you have a resilient business, you could answer a set of questions and you're good, you're happy, right? You're good, you have peace of mind with how things are going within your business, regardless of what's going on around you, right? Doesn't mean that everything's going to be easy and you're going to make more money than everybody else. You'll still have difficulty in managing, um, but you compare that to a company who is kind of doing it by the seat of their pants,
Yeah.
don't really have a lot of consistency, can't really predict their outcomes, and then they get high inflation on their line of credit, or they get labor force uh, changes where it's hard to hire, right? And now all of a sudden things start to kind of dissipate and it gets really hard, very stressful. That is not
Right.
a resilient company. So anyway, the topics we
Wow.
talk about are how do you build resiliency within your organization and within your family.
I love it. I mean, I mean, really, I mean, when it comes down to it, as a business owner myself, and I would say like resiliency, consistency, that's pretty much what everybody is at. Probably, not even business owners,
Yeah.
humans in general.
Yes. Yeah,
Uh,
that's right. Yeah, it feels good, right? The problem is family and business is complex and it's messy, mostly because there's a bunch of humans in there doing a bunch of stuff, talking to each other and making each
right.
other angry and poking at you, and right, and who knows what all those things are.
Yeah.
And so it becomes it's just a high discipline effort, highly intentional effort to be resilient.
And is it, I mean, I know I'm probably going to know the answer before I even ask it, but is it obtainable? I mean,
Mhm. Yeah, for
is
sure.
it,
Yeah. Yeah.
but it's always a work in progress and a journey, I'm
Yeah, it's
guessing.
never done. It's like software, right? Uh,
Right.
you might be resilient today, but all the factors are always changing, right? The market
Yeah.
around you is changing. That all the economic factors that we just talked about are changing. The people inside your business is changing, right? All those things are always changing. So you're adjusting with them. Um, and
Right.
that hopefully that doesn't sound like, well, how can I get consistency if you're always changing? That's not the point. The point is you're always looking to improve. So it's continual improvement. So
Right.
when something shifts, meaning outside of you, the market shifts,
Right.
we have a mindset that we're always continually improving, and we see, oh, well, that's different. What does that mean? Should we
Right.
adjust our processes? Should we adjust the way we engage? And we do that, and then we have short feedback loops, and we say, oh, that worked, that made sense, let's do that for every customer, or let's do that
Right.
always, right? Until
Right.
we find a different reason not to do it, right? That's a resilient mindset.
Great. I think on that note, we'll wrap up, but everybody, please check out Paul Spencer's work with Second Nature Solutions. And Paul, what's the best way for people to get a hold of you if they want to learn more?
Yeah, you can go to the you can go to the website. So it's secondnature.solutions. And that's the website. So you can sign up for the newsletter, all the things that we're talking about with the resilience talk and resilience newsletters out there. You can watch different videos and things that are out there. And then you just go on LinkedIn, right? And just connect with me, send me a message.
Well, thanks so much, Paul, man. This was great. So I've definitely learned a lot. So I hope everybody else did too. And thanks so much for joining me, Paul. And we'll catch everyone next time. Thanks so much for watching. Take
Yeah,
care.
thank you. Thanks.